Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stephen King Cast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Each week, I'll review one entry in the bibliography of Stephen King and the chronological order of publication. Now, it's what I usually say at the beginning of each one of these episodes, but this episode's a little bit different. What I'm doing in this episode is I'm giving you a taste of what to get over on the Patreon page. So just to remind everyone, in case you weren't aware, not only have I been producing and putting out weekly Stephen King cast episodes the way that I have been for 12 plus years, I have also been putting out multiple episodes per week over on Patreon. And let me just describe the different tiers on Patreon. And there has been a change for those of you who have been listening for a while and have been curious. So let me just explain the two tiers and what to expect over there. So on the constant reader tier, that is aligned very closely to the Stephen King cast as you tend to listen to it. It is Stephen King based. And what you get is early episodes of the Stephen King cast, and you get book reviews of non-Stephen King related material, including lately Dean Koontz, the works of Dean Koontz, and Interview with a Vampire. So that has been a joy to do. And on top of that, anytime there is Stephen King news, I will record an episode presenting the news and giving my thoughts on what that means for us as constant readers. So that's over on the constant reader feed. Now, I have made a change to the feed called Other Worlds Than These. Other Worlds Than These has everything that I just explained now. That was not the case before. And on top of that, the Other Worlds Than These feed also has, as it sounds, everything else. And this is where there have been multiple episodes coming out per week. So I have covered Godzilla. I have covered Monarch Legacy of Monsters. I have done a deep dive into Batman. I have done a deep dive into Daredevil. I provided the state of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I have covered Daredevil Born Again. I have done reviews of Primal, Obsession. Something very bad is going to happen. I covered the first 3 episodes of Widow's Bay, and I plan on returning to give some more thoughts on Widow's Bay. I did a breakdown of the overview of my thoughts on The Boys and kicked off the first 3 episodes of The Boys. I will be recording my thoughts on the finale and kind of put that into perspective of other television show finales and what to expect from a concluding story, which is something that I had covered many years ago on the Stephen King cast when I examined each of his endings. So I'll sort of dive back into that. And during the month of May, I did a deep dive into Star Wars, where I examined Star Wars as a franchise, the history of its relationship to pop culture, and then I did a separate episode covering the most recent Dave Filoni produced animation cartoon show, Maul Shadow Lord, which was a lot of fun. And keeping with that, I just recorded my episode on The Mandalorian and Grogu, a movie which came out last week, the first Star Wars film in 7 years since The Rise of Skywalker, and it was very cathartic for me to be able to get my thoughts together and put them out there. So the full episode is over on Patreon, but I just wanted to give you a taste of it so you can check it out. And if you like it, head on over to Patreon and subscribe to one of the tiers, and I hope that you enjoy, everyone. So here's my part of my breakdown of The Mandalorian and Grogu. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Other Worlds Than These, one man's musings on all things pop culture. And today I'm traveling a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away to discuss all of my thoughts on The Mandalorian and Grogu, the first Star Wars theatrical release since 2019's conclusion to the sequel trilogy, The Rise of Skywalker. All right, so let's talk about Star Wars. In order to best understand the state of Star Wars, which I did a whole episode on May the 4th. So if you haven't listened to that, please head on over there and listen to my thoughts on Star Wars, my relationship with Star Wars, pop culture's relationship with Star Wars throughout the year, and the tumultuous time we find ourselves in as Star Wars fans right now. But in order to contextualize the most recent movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu, it's best we talk about the state of Star Wars and where Star Wars finds itself. So I won't be stepping on what I had discussed during that particular episode, but I think that it is important to contextualize The Mandalorian and Grogu. So in order to best do that, let's travel not so long ago in a galaxy far, far away, but a little while ago. Let's talk about the last theatrical movie that had come out from the Star Wars franchise, which was The Rise of Skywalker. I think that we need to acknowledge that by the time The Rise of Skywalker came out, the Republic, or the Empire, of Star Wars was already crumbling. In 2017, there was the great anticipation of The Force Awakens. Everything leading into that movie was an accomplishment. There's nothing that you can say that will be able to take away from that accomplishment. From the original announcement that Disney was going to be providing a sequel trilogy, bringing back the original cast, to the original promotional material that they started to send out into the world with that photograph of the table reading with everyone sitting on the couches. It was an incredible feeling to the original trailers for The Force Awakens, leading to that moment in December. And I remember speaking to one of my friends and saying that this feels like an amusement park that's going to open. And right now we have this anticipation and this buzz and this feeling. We can't wait until we get on that roller coaster, and we are in line. And it's the same thing of when you are waiting in line for a roller coaster. You just can't wait to get on, and you get in the coaster, and it starts taking you up, and it's taking you up, and it's slow and slow and it's slow, and you're just waiting for that moment to go over that dip and then plunge and just feel that feeling. Feel your gut get taken away in the exhilaration of this roller coaster ride. But once that roller coaster ride is done, that anticipation is gone. And you have your season pass, you'll be able to go back whenever you want. And it's going to be fun and it's going to be good, but with diminishing returns. And nothing is going to feel the way that it did in that anticipation. And that's how I felt about The Force Awakens. And the build-up was fantastic. I will never forget seeing that movie and feeling that movie and being in my feelings, but there were legitimate criticisms that came out after The Force Awakens, mainly that it was just a remake of A New Hope, and it didn't promote newness, which I'll get to in a little bit. It didn't provide complex thoughts or challenge the status quo. Quite frankly, there's no reason why the structure of that movie should exist the way that it does. If the Republic is the main governing body, the one that has consolidated power, how is the Empire, and call it the Empire, I mean, it's the First Order, but it's the Empire, how come they are the ones that have the power, and why is the governing body treated like it's a rebellion? It doesn't make sense. If you hold it up, they want to have their cake and eat it too. It would have been much more interesting if things had been reversed and the Sith are attacking with an inversion of what the rebellion was in the original movie, with a modern lens of terrorism and corruption of the youth. That would have been interesting if those in power, if our Luke, if our Leia, if our Hans, if our Landos, if they had to contend with an apathetic youth who didn't know the struggles that they went through, a youth that was taking advantage of the freedoms and the pleasures and the comforts of the age that our original characters had fought so greatly for. And these ideals are corrupted by the dark side, who is taking advantage of this apathy. That would have been interesting. And some ideas of that are current and take place within The Last Jedi, but unfortunately that is placed in a movie that exists in a vacuum and was rejected by half of the fan base. If that idea had been the idea for these new movies, I think I would have a different personal relationship with them. But, as we know, those ideas were criticized and rejected by a large portion who don't want to explore what effect that might have on our original characters. And I get it. How some people feel about Luke Skywalker and the original characters is how I feel about Batman. And I reject something along the lines of, let's say, what Zack Snyder did to the Batman character or the Superman character, trying to explore these characters through new lenses. I particularly find that these characters and those explorations by Zack Snyder were not truthful to who Batman is, who Superman is. And I still feel as though Rian Johnson's exploration of Luke Skywalker is very true to the original character of Luke Skywalker as we first met him in Star Wars, who was whiny. And he still is, and I like that. And he can be both. He can be hero, and he can still be a little bit whiny. And I think that there's something to be said about this character who fought so hard. He fought so hard. He lost his hand. He lost his friends. He lost his father. He gave everything to fight against the corruption of the Empire. And it's one thing to be in your early 20s and fight. It's another thing to be in your, 60s and wrestle with the fact that everything that you fought for, it's just a cycle and it's coming around again. And there's something so human about that. And for him to have a moment of doubt where he considers he has an opportunity to end something before it begins and to stop the rise of what he knows will be the dark side, the possibility of the Empire returning, call it what you will. He has a human moment where he wrestles with an idea. He doesn't go through with anything, and he's still the hero that you want him to be because he doesn't turn to the dark side in that moment. But for him to be human, based on what he had experienced and the sacrifices that he had made, that to me is, it allows Luke to be human and to have that character wrestle with the mythology of himself. It's the best thing that ever happened to Luke Skywalker. And to me, the corruption and the seduction of the youth through Kylo Ren is something that I would have loved to have seen more of, rather than just having him be just a carbon clone of Darth Vader. Imbuing him with him being a fanboy was also a great concept. But I think that fans just wanted more of what they loved and not be challenged with something new. And then the last, with The Last Jedi, for everything that I said, there was a lot of new concepts that were wholeheartedly rejected by a good chunk of the audience. And then that led to the cowardly knee-jerk reaction in dumping the original plan for the concluding chapter, which would have been called The Duel of the Fates, and the cobbling together of what became The Rise of Skywalker. However, the late fall/early winter of 2019 was also a very interesting time for Star Wars. If it had just been The Rise of Skywalker, I think that we would be talking about Star Wars in the past tense. But that fall/early winter also brought about a property that happened to reinvigorate the franchise, a little show called The Mandalorian. And it wasn't that long ago. It really wasn't, but it seems in some ways forever ago. And it's hard to remember the fervor around that and the fact that Disney was launching its own streaming subscription. Now Disney Plus is just Disney Plus, but then to know that you were going to have all of the Marvel content, all the Star Wars content, everything from Disney, all of the Pixar, that was a big deal. That was a big deal. And for it to tie in the first ever true Star Wars show on a streaming network, that to me was such a sign of good faith in this product. And launching something called The Mandalorian, the idea that this show would make good on a promise never fulfilled with the character of Boba Fett was important. There was the credibility of having Jon Favreau at the helm, along with the geek sensibility of Dave Filoni, who had been the steward of Star Wars throughout the years once George Lucas lay his lightsabers down. Like I said, tying it to the launch of Disney's streaming service was a major sign of good faith and a belief in the product and the importance of Star Wars. And with the launch of that first episode, there was a massive surprise at the end. The newest inclusion to the Star Wars universe, a little character named Baby Yoda. And it's almost easy to forget how much of a cultural whirlwind this was once we first laid our eyes on this little Baby Yoda. There was so much here that they did right. Making it a puppet, having characters actually interact with a thing. People fell in love. I don't know if you remember, but Joe Dante from Gremlins, he got a lot of heat for his comments, where basically he accused Disney of just ripping off his design of the Mogwai. And that led to a great debate where people started dumping on him because, you know, clearly Yoda predated the Mogwai and Gremlins. However, hot take, I agree with Joe Dante. Because what they do with Baby Yoda, they don't make Grogu look like Yoda. He's green, he's got the ears, but they change the design of the character to make him look much more adorable. The ears are bigger, the eyes are bigger, the mouth is smaller, it's a smaller face. If you compare Grogu, if you put him side by side, Gizmo and Yoda, I think he looks more like Gizmo. I think it's more of a Gizmo Mogwai design. So Joe Dante, if you're listening, I fully support your arguments. I do believe that they borrowed heavily from the Mogwai design. But that was another thing. Like, people really talked about that. And listen, Yoda was a beloved character, and we get to see this version of a Yoda in a much different light, where once Yoda was the wise one who knew all, who carried the secrets and the history of the galaxy. Here was a Yoda-looking character who was a complete inversion of that, who must be protected, who was new to this world, new to this galaxy. And in many ways, by the time The Rise of Skywalker came out, just a few weeks after the premiere of The Mandalorian, people didn't care that much about that version of Star Wars anymore. It was all about the world of The Mandalorian and this little Baby Yoda. That's what people wanted. So if you were to tell me in 2019 that in 2026, the first Star Wars movie in theaters was a theatrical movie starring The Mandalorian, I would have thought that it would have been the biggest movie of all time. All right, everyone, that's just a taste of the episode. There's a lot more to it in which I get into my actual thoughts of The Mandalorian and Grogu. So for all of my thoughts on The Mandalorian and Grogu, for all of my thoughts on Star Wars, for all of my thoughts on Maul, Shadow Lord, head on over to patreon.com/Stephen Kingcast, and check them out along with everything else that is there. It has been a blast being able to record episodes on all of my thoughts related to everything under the sun other than Stephen King, though I still love podcasting about Stephen King. But while we are talking about looking ahead and things that we love, so I had mentioned earlier one of the reviews that I have done over on both the Constant Reader feed and Other Worlds Than These is Interview with a Vampire. Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire. Shortly, I will be releasing the review of the sequel, The Vampire Lestat. And this is in preparation of the upcoming third season of AMC's Interview with a Vampire, which is a show that everyone should be watching, but unfortunately no one is. It is not in the pop cultural zeitgeist, but it is basically a perfect show. It's incredible. It honors the source material, and you might argue that it actually improves the source material, and it has that very rare magic that happens when you marry an actor or actress and the fictional role that they play. Sometimes it happens and it's absolute magic, like Christopher Reeve playing Superman, or Patrick Stewart playing Professor X. Some characters are just born to play these characters. And that's what we have with Sam Reed with The Vampire Lestat. He understands the assignment. He embodies this character in a way that you didn't think was possible. It's incredible to watch him bring the Brat Prince to life. So if you were like me, growing up in the 80s and 90s and perusing all of the horror sections in your local bookstores, you know that there was the King section, the Kuntz section, the John Saul section, the Robert McCammon section, and then there was the Anne Rice section. And the Vampire Chronicles was huge back in the day. So it has been great to sink my fangs into the Vampire Chronicles and do a deep dive analysis on the first two books. I will be doing regular reviews of the third season of the AMC show this summer. I will also be doing regular reviews of the third season of House of the Dragon. And I will be recording anything else that is of interest to you as an audience and to me. So, like I said, I did a review of Obsession this weekend. Backrooms comes out. Unfortunately, I'm not able to see it this weekend. I would love to, but I hope to see it soon. And as soon as I do, if I have some thoughts, I will be able to share them all with you. So, if you have not checked out the Patreon page, please head on over there. There's a lot of good stuff for you to enjoy. So if you have enjoyed the Stephen King cast over the years, you will enjoy the Patreon page. So thank you everyone for listening to this, and may you have long days and pleasant nights, and I'll see you here next time where MOON spells Stephen King cast.